Welcome, we're going to go over CARs, controlled articular rotations. So this is just a fantastic basic mobility technique that you can use on a daily basis. You can use it at the beginning of your warm-up, you can sprinkle it into different parts of your training sessions, but it's just a fantastic way to make sure that your joints are doing joint things, right? Articular rotations, we're thinking about the joint capsule and if we have bone and bone connected, that space that encapsulates them, right, that kind of holds them together, there's tissues there. And so if we are trying to execute a movement, if we see that, you have have difficulty sitting into a squat, you may want to, immediately assess an individual joint, right? And so we're going to look at those one by one and make sure that a joint can do what a joint is supposed to do. Can a shoulder do what the shoulder is supposed to do? All right, so just follow along. We'll go from head to toe and try not to miss anything. Okay, so the first one we're gonna do is for your neck. And so the goal of this is to think like from neck down, we're just stuck in cement. We don't wanna see any additional movement, right? We just wanna think about how do we make the neck do neck things. One rule of thumb is that we're going to kind of give some tension to the rest of the system so that we don't move without really, subconsciously try to get more range. The other thing is that if potentially we reach a point in our circle that there's any kind of a pinch or a discomfort, we don't need to go into that discomfort. So that can be for all of these joints that we're gonna go through. We'll start with the neck. Think like if we had a marker that was coming out of our mouth, or even a laser, whatever visual, helpful aid and cue that works for you. We're gonna think about tucking, coming to the side, rotating, coming back through, all the way to the other side, and then back through. So our goal is to make as big of a circle with that marker, with that laser as possible. If somewhere along the way you feel a pinch, all I want you to do is think of yourself like carving out a little bit of space, like a little Pac-Man mouth that is gonna help you to avoid that particular discomfort, right? And so our goal is then gonna be able to try to lessen the size of that mouth over time. So we'll do it again, right? So we tuck, we look to the side, we're gonna side bend, we're gonna come back through, and then when we reach the bottom to the starting point, we're gonna reverse that. To the side, side bend, open it back. All right, so if you needed to carve out the little space, let's say we had a pinch here, we'd come over, right, we'd look into it, ow, that hurts, come up a little bit, rejoin the circle. Maybe there's another ow, come a little bit out of it, continue the circle, and then finish through. The goal is that we can be able to make this circle all the way through, eventually with greater and greater range, with less and less discomfort. So that's our neck, right? From the neck, we're gonna go down. There are two in the shoulders. We'll start with the scapulae. So the scapula, super simple. We're just gonna put our hands at our pockets. Lots of cheating moments that people have in this one. They'll try to bend their elbows. They'll get their hands out of the way, right? They're gonna try to compensate in other ways. We're just keeping them right by our pockets, and we're gonna take those circles to go forward, making big circles just strictly with the scapulae, and then we can also take them in reverse. Again, we just want the shoulder blades to do the work. We don't want to try to see that it does this full like elbow movement. We don't want it to be like this whole like body roll, right? We're just trying to get this circle and see if we can regain and just feel a little bit more control through those movements, okay? All of these are, by the way, these are just being done with no resistance. We can add resistance to them as we go, but this is just basic, just give you an overview of how they go through. So scapular cars, forward and back. Then we go to the glenohumeral joint, right? Your ball and your socket, right? You have the head of your humerus, fits into that capsule, that kind of like dinner plate that is your glenohumeral joint. So what this one is, especially this one, people are going to want to swim through. Keep this stuck like you're stuck in cement, right? So give yourself a little bit of tension, brace a little bit. We're gonna come up, palm up to the sky. Take that through as high as we can possibly get, right? When we get up to here, then you're going to, when you reach that point where you cannot any farther, go into flexion with your shoulder, then you're gonna start to internally rotate, take it back into extension, and then end by your pocket. From there, start with yourself internally rotated at that shoulder, go back into extension, come all the way up as high as you can. When you get to that point where you can no longer go through extension, you're gonna then externally rotate, palm up, and finish the flexion down through to your pocket again, okay? So I'll show you from this side. Stay nice and set. Palm comes up through, get to that point where we no longer can. Try not to make sure that we're biasing in any way. Rotate in where we can. Take it back to your pocket. Go back into extension. Watch for here, right? This is a point where maybe I feel some resistance, right? I could be tempted to lean out to increase that workspace or to do some other movements. All I want to do is just continue through and feel some tension through that shoulder, but I'm identifying and isolating so that it's just the shoulder doing the work, just that glenohumeral joint, not letting my T-spine get involved just yet. From there, we have our T-spine, so our thoracic spine. This one can be challenging to avoid, letting your hips become involved. So what you could do potentially is take a seat while you do them. I'm going to show you standing first. We'll go this one. Okay. So I like to give myself a big hug because I love myself and I deserve it. And then we're going to kind of go from there. We're going to tuck that T-spine, right? So get a little bit of flexion, tucking my chin with it as well. And then this is the hard part. I'm going to rotate laterally. The goal is that I can rotate and dissociate the T-spine from the pelvis. A lot of times you'll see that people want to let this follow, right? So tuck, go to the side as much as I can, side bend, and then finish and try to get that circle to come through around to the other side. Side bend, rotate, finish back into that flexion point. And then we'll reverse, right? Okay, tuck, rotate, side bend, extend, rotate through to the opposite side, and then finish at the starting point. If that's too challenging, we can take a seat and we can work on it from here, okay? All this is just gonna do is just let me isolate and do the same movement. Tuck, side bend, extend through, get to the other side, rotate to the opposite side, and finish through. Another thing that we can do here is to potentially use a medicine ball. Sometimes just the positioning of the arms, not sure necessarily where to go, or to be able to build enough tension through your core and as you move through it. Sometimes having a medicine ball, one, it gives a little bit of resistance, but it also gives some external feedback on where we want to be. So hugging around like a big bear hug, if I go through this movement now, that can make it a little bit easier because there's less, I think, temptation to move your arms. There's less, it's an easier fixed point to build some tension through your upper body here. Okay, we'll reverse, we'll go the other way. So tucked, we're gonna rotate, side bend, extend through, rotate, side bend, and finish to the front again. Okay, so that's your T-spine, that's your thoracic car. It's a fantastic one to do. It's a great way to just get some movement through here that we tend to lose, especially if we're seated a lot and in this, this type of positions. From that, our L spine does not have a ton of range of motion. We're not going to worry about those. We're going to go straight down to the hips. We're going to take these individually, right? We want to look at the individual joints. So very similar to the shoulder, right? We have a lot of range of motion from a ball and socket joint. So this may be, again, pretty challenging for a lot of people. One way is to just do it free, open here. Another is if we had something to hold on to give ourselves a little bit of like an anchor and something to build some tension with. So I'll show you here free, and then we may use it, show it again, holding on to something that's a little more sturdy, okay? So I'm building tension through the rest of my system. Now from here up, I don't want to see any movement necessarily through the torso as I take my hip through, okay? So building some tension here. I'm going to start with coming across, pulling into external rotation, right? So we're externally rotating. We're going to flex that hip, and then we're going to try to flex and begin to abduct, come out as far as we can, internally rotate into extension, and then come through here. From there, abduct, we're rotating the hip out, try not to lean, bring it forward into that external rotation again, whew, and then come back down. You can see why it's a little bit challenging, why we would sometimes want to hold on to something. So we'll do it again one more time, all right? Stay fixed, flex up, continue that circle through, try not to let the torso lean away, brace, right? Come into extension, abduct, you're in that internal rotation, right? You can see I have a temptation to go forward in this one, so I'm trying to get a little bit too much range of motion through that. Just let the hip itself do the circle, which just means that we might not get as much of a circle without the compensation, and that's okay. So now, if we have something to anchor ourselves with, I can build tension out through more of the system this way. We're going to try that again, okay? So I come up into external rotation, into flexion. I'm bracing through my system. Now I'm letting the hip itself do all the work. As I come out back to the front, we've built that tension. It's a lot easier for me to maintain that upright position and avoid that temptation to come to the side, okay? So if we watch it one more time, if I give myself a little bit of tension here, you can see it from the side here, build some irradiation, some tension through the rest of the system, come up into flexion, into that abduction as we start to turn into internal rotation, into extension, extend the hip, abduct, still internally rotated, coming forward now, starting to externally rotate into flexion, and then to come back down. So that's your hip car. Okay. Now the last two that we're going to do are the knee and the ankle. So with the knee, again, this one is a little bit easier to do from a seated position. I'll show you this side just so you can kind of see some things that I want you to want to point out specifically from what the knee itself is doing. So we're going to try to block and avoid using the hip or anything else, right? The knee it is a hinge joint, but there is a tiny bit of rotation that we can see in the knee, right? The tibial, you have your tibia, right? Your shin, you have your fibula. They sit kind of two sides into the condyle with the meniscus in between it, right? So your femur has two pieces that kind of like give a little bit of a concave space. The meniscus sits in between, and then each of these bones will meet that meniscus as that little buffer between the two, right? But there is then some rotation that's allowed between those joints, between those bones. So what we're going to do is, right, we see that we have some internal and external rotation available for that knee. What we're going to do is we're going to come into a corner, right? So I'm going to go into internal rotation, into flexion. Once I can't go any further, then I'm going to go into external rotation. I'm going to extend the knee, go into internal rotation at the top of that, and then come back down into flexion. And that's my circle. So now, again, external to flexion to internal, to extension, now back into flexion. So let's reverse it. I'm flexed, internally rotated. I'm going to extend that knee, externally rotate, flex it, internally rotate. One thing that you can kind of see is the biceps femoris, this is your short head of your hamstring, is that external rotator. So as I go from here to internal rotation to external rotation, this muscle shortens, right? Again, flexion, and internal to external, extension through that to internal, back into flexion. We can reverse it, flexion, internal rotation to internal rotation, extension to external, and then back into flexion. So that's your knee car. And then finally, we're going to do the ankle. The ankle can be done seated. It can also be done standing. We just want to try to focus on the ankle being the ankle, right? So if I'm just here, I can, again, flex it. The ankle has a little bit more freedom than the knee. All right, so we're just trying to draw that as big of a circle. Pointing our toes can act as the marker or the laser. The temptation in this one is going to be to let the hip or the entire knee start to assist with the circle. So we want to stay locked in here. Let it be strictly the ankle and nothing else. So we can do it seated. If we want to make it a little bit more of a balance challenge, we can be here and go through that full range. Right, take it through the full circle from this balanced position. You have some options. Those are your CARs. We did ankles, knees, hips, T-spine, scapula, glenohumeral joint, and our necks. The only ones that we didn't do were the elbow and the wrist. So let's do those again. Think of it now as we just have mirrors of our body, right? So we just did the knee, we just did the ankles. Same joints here in our upper body. Two bones into one bone. The elbow, right? We want to work on our internal and external rotation here. So we have external rotation. I can extend fully, right? Then I can take it into internal rotation. And again, this is the tempting part. The tempting part is to allow that shoulder to join in on the party. Just to that, right? Just to the internal rotation of what the elbow itself can do. Then I'm going to flex it fully, external rotation, and then get the rotation of the joint itself, right? So we're trying to see if we can move the elbow through without letting the shoulder do too much of the work, right? So it's from there. Then I'm going to rotate it in, see what kind of range we can get into that. Right, and then rotate. Again, I'm tempted, this one I don't do as much, but I'm tempted to get some of the range from my shoulder. I'm just trying to focus on just letting the elbow itself be the one that's the mover, okay? And then finally, from the wrist, again, we're going to try to keep ourselves I'm almost like you can think like you have your favorite drink here, just sitting on that forearm. So we want to see that there's no movement through here, right? So this is nice and flat, and then I'm just letting the wrist do the rotation. Similar that it can be tempting to use your fingers and your wrist and you know, either upstream or downstream to do the work. I'm just trying to let it be strictly the wrist that's doing the motion. So then I would take it through external to internal into that flexion and extension as I go through the circle. This one can be, you know, pretty challenging, especially in a world where we love to be on our phones and be on, you know, typing a lot. This can be a simple one just to regain a little bit of control and a little bit of action through that wrist, okay? So again, we went through neck, we went through 2 in our shoulder, we went through our T-spine, we added in the elbow and the wrist at the end. We did our hips, our knees, and our ankles. Those are your controlled articular rotations. If we did an, you know, a more of a movement screen, we could then use one of these particular individual joint assessments as just a nice way to see, does that joint do what that joint should do? Okay, so think about how we can potentially incorporate these after the fact that we've done a movement screen and be a little bit more specific and isolate that individual joint to see if it does what it should.